What was behind Catherine's major comeback to the royals this week? Who's the new arrival to the royal family? And is there yet another new twist in Harry's US visa row? We've got another fascinating show coming up for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential, your favourite royal programme. We know this, it's a fact, isn't it? I'm Jo Elvin and we have some of your favourites back on the panel, that's right. It's the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome, both of you. Now, a reminder as always, for the best royal videos, just make sure you hit that subscribe button. It costs nothing, but it guarantees you will be notified whenever we have a great new video. Now, speaking of which, we put out a really fun new compilation video earlier this week looking back at some of the discussions we've had on this show about royal fashion and what the likes of Catherine, Sophie and Camilla and more like to wear. So if you missed that, that's going to play straight after this, so do enjoy. Oh, that was a lot of info, wasn't it? Rebecca, let's kick off with some more new information, a new royal arrival. Tell us everything.
Brilliant news. So Princess Beatrice has had her new baby, her second daughter. She's called Athena Elizabeth Rose, born 4 pounds 5 ounces, so teeny tiny. But I love the name. Athena, I think, was their personal choice, but obviously Elizabeth as tribute to Queen Elizabeth, and Rose, I believe, as tribute to Princess Margaret, who was middle name was Rose. I think it's a beautiful name, and they've obviously all declared themselves happy, healthy, and overjoyed to be a family of 5.
Oh, that's great news. Now, tiny baby, and also I believe that Beatrice was due to be speaking at a conference this week, so can we assume that this baby's a bit early?
Yeah, I mean, you could tell by the weight anyway, but as someone said to me, she came slightly early, but not unexpectedly so, which I think, again, makes sense of the decision that she made at Christmas not to go to her husband Edo's family in Italy. She'd planned, but to join the family at Sandringham. And yes, you're right, she was meant to be at Davos and didn't turn up. So I think everyone had a bit of an indication that maybe, something was, not entirely as it should be. But I think what's very sweet is that Beatrice and Edo have made a point of thanking the staff at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital for the wonderful care they've had, and making the point of saying mother and baby are now at home. I should have said actually that Athena was born Wednesday last week, January the 22nd. So I think they've waited a few days. So they've got her home safely, and they felt they could announce that everything is well.
Oh, that's really... I was a preemie.
Were you?
Well, I turned out all right, didn't I? Normal?
I mean, look at you, strapping, healthy thing.
Richard, what does this mean? And I think a lot of our viewers would love to know. What does it mean for the line of succession, if anything?
Well, yes, the new baby Athena is 11th in the line of succession, which means, in line to the throne. Obviously, you wouldn't expect to get to a number 11. And it does...
that would be quite a cataclysmic event, wouldn't it be?
Yes, it would. But so she's number 11. And what that does do is push her cousins, the sons of Beatrice's sister, Princess Eugenie, who are August and Ernest. That pushes them that little bit further down the line. And in terms of the succession, remember, we still have someone there, frankly, in my view, who shouldn't be on that line at all.
Oh, let me guess.
Prince Harry, who is still number 5. But yeah, he remains there as things stand. But obviously, and hopefully, he will never be king.
You just say it like it is,
exactly,
Richard.
Yes. I love the ambiguity, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I never know where Richard stands on things.
Exactly. Now, speaking of royal children, Rebecca, William made quite a cute admission this week about his children, didn't he?
Yeah, he was up in Toxteth doing some engagements, and I think anyone who's a parent will recognise this. He was talking to some school children, and they basically said, we can't remember what we did. And he said, God, that's exactly like my children. They come home from school and, how was your day, sweetheart? I don't know.
Fine.
Can't remember.
What'd you do? Nothing.
What'd you have for lunch? Can't remember. And you could just hear the kind of very typical parents in him. I think it probably would strike a chord with a lot of us.
Oh, now, Richard, perhaps to show that it's not all glamour being a royal, as sometimes we often assume it is, apparently William had to hold some worms this week. That seems above and beyond the call.
This is because Prince William is the Prince of Wales, and when he became the Prince of Wales, he inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, which is a vast estate, which is not just in Cornwall, but in other places such as Devon, and in this case, Herefordshire, near the Welsh borders, and he visited a farm. So the duchy owns the land, but they have tenant farmers, and this was a very innovative farm where they're trying out new sort of green methods, something that's close to his heart, of course, and to that of his father, King Charles. And it was the one thing that really caught his imagination was it was a new composting method, new, very traditional, I think, but using worms. I think it's one that had been sort of pioneered in Japan. They're trying out on this farm, and he was really enjoying seeing these worms.
Well, it sounds like a really boring thing that you had to do on a geography school trip. But
no, I mean,
that's
quite a random average royal week, I'd say, actually.
Well, certainly he seemed to be enjoying it anyway.
Well, speaking of random, you had an interesting conversation with William this week, didn't you, Rebecca? Apparently he also got you a bit wet.
Yeah, not how I expected to start the day. I was joining him in Surrey to cover a visit to a actually really fascinating company there called Naturemetrics. It was a finalist in his Earthshot Awards last year, and they actually extract environmental DNA, known as eDNA, out of soil and water and even the air. And they can tell what animals and what species, even what bacteria there, which really helps companies in their work. In all parts of the world. So quite a serious message, but there was a fun point. They decided to do some pond dipping with some local children. So they were taking samples of the water from this lake and extracting the eDNA out of it. And the lady who run the company said, look, we need to expel some of the water from these syringes. Whose direction should we put it in? And obviously we're standing there as a media pack.
Oh dear.
And she said, how about that way? And you could see William's lips twitch, and he went, well, obviously I would never be able to suggest that, but if you are. And he entered into it quite enthusiastically. He had three goes at it, he got very, very close to it. So it was very funny, but when we went into the building for the rest of the engagement afterwards, I could hear him round a corner, and someone said, how did the job go? And he said, I really enjoyed soaking those journalists. And I couldn't resist. And before I'd even thought of it, I just turned around and went, hold on, we're here, you know.
Yeah.
And he poked his head round the door and went, I know.
I have to say, it could be worse. I remember when Prince Andrew was on a tour, I think it was in California, and he had some paint, and he actually was throwing paint at the journalists, which
that doesn't sound quite as good-natured.
Yeah,
No,
I think I would have been less tolerant of that.
Yeah, and I think it did some damage to the photographer's cameras, so they weren't very happy at all.
That's therapy for the royal family, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
soaking a few journalists.
I would stress this was all very, very, very light-hearted, and it was taken in the spirit in which it was intended.
Good to hear.
Okay, good to know. You weren't water cannoned then.
No, it was very funny, and these things actually make a royal job. They make fantastic pictures, which is what we all want at the end of the day.
Exactly. Now, Richard, we did see a nice exchange, didn't we, with the King, who was in Norfolk for the weekend.
Oh, this was the King popped in. He was at Sandringham Estate, which, as we know, huge private estate in Norfolk. And one of the things that goes on is a park run, which is something very popular here. Lots of people out running through the park, and they run through the parkland of Sandringham. And he popped in. I think they were in the cafe beforehand and was cheering them on. I mean, I have to say, he didn't quite join the run. He was just sort of cheering them on, but they were surprised and delighted to see him.
He is a bit of a popper-inner, our King, isn't he? Do you remember when he sort of like just went into the throng of tourists outside the Abbey? He's like, he really gets in amongst it.
Yeah, he did that when was doing a job with him just before Christmas. And also, do you remember that footage from a couple of years ago where he was just tramping along Balmoral in the estate, and he stopped and spoke to some walkers and went, oh, you've been staying in one of my cottages, and they filmed it all. And I think it's nice because that is actually what he's like in person, but I think people don't get to see it that often.
No, imagine what it would be like doing that job if you really weren't interested in people at all. I mean, luckily, the King, I think, like his mother, is genuinely interested in people.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, on to, sort of like more somber topics. Rebecca, the King was taking a short break before a huge occasion in Poland.
Yeah, so I was with the King at the start of the week in Krakow, and he was attending the commemorations of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And I think, we don't need to explain to everyone how moving that occasion was, hearing the stories of these survivors who had survived the mass extermination there of more than 1 million people, mostly Jews, but also other Polish people and minorities. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen the King so moved.
Really?
I mean, he genuinely was frequently, as everyone there was, wiping his eyes, especially when he was shown the collection there they've got of belongings of the victims, many of whom had no idea of the fate that they were about to undergo. And he walked past something called the death wall, where people were shot, and you could just see how shocked and how haggard he looked. Nothing prepares you for seeing this in the flesh.
I was really surprised, actually, that he was apparently our first reigning monarch to visit Auschwitz.
I was surprised, and actually I assumed he probably visited it as the Prince of Wales, but he hadn't. But I think it's really important to stress that's not through a kind of lack of commitment to the cause, because before the actual ceremony, I was with him at a Jewish community centre in Krakow, and he visited Krakow in 2002 and met some Holocaust survivors there, one of which who I interviewed on Monday. And the King, then Prince of Wales, actually said to him, "What can we do to help you?" And he said, "We would love a centre here where us survivors could meet to share our stories, but also one that's for hope and optimism for the future, that promotes interfaith harmony, community cohesion." And actually the King said, "Right, I'm going to do this for you." And he gave a personal donation, he got Jewish World Relief involved, and that centre is now there and is celebrating 17 years in existence. And the director of the place said to me, like, he's one of the few people who came here and kept their promise. This place wouldn't exist if it wasn't for him. So I understand those who have criticism of the royal family, but I think this is a perfect example of the King's commitment to promoting interfaith harmony over the years.
Let's talk about Catherine now, who was also part of a Holocaust memorial service. And we saw a really nice gesture from her, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a really lovely event. I mean, she wasn't due to attend. It was always going to be Prince William. And then on Monday morning, we got an early heads up that she was going to go as well. And that was because, A, she really wanted to pay her respects, but also two Holocaust survivors that she'd previously photographed for a project for the 75th anniversary were there. And of course, I was told by some of the people there, she was absolutely mobbed when she got there. People were so genuinely excited to see her. And one of the things I noticed that she was wearing was this very distinctive 5-string pearl necklace.
Yes.
And there was some debate at the time, could it have been one of the Queen's? And I left it a day or so because I didn't really think it was appropriate to write about on the day of the commemorations. But I tracked it down to a lady called Susan Kaplan, who's one of the world's experts on vintage jewellery. And actually she told me that Catherine's stylist actually bought it a while back, but she didn't know when she was going to wear it. And so the fact that she chose to wear a Jewish-owned brand to a Holocaust memorial event, she said, "I cannot tell you how much that meant to me." She was incredibly, incredibly moved, and I think she thinks it was no coincidence she waited until that occasion to wear it.
It's actually astonishing sometimes, isn't it? The thought that must go into how they put those outfits together. I mean, people trivialise fashion, but the real meaning in that is amazing.
Yeah,
remember, so much of what the royals do is symbolism, isn't it? So how better to show it than by what you're wearing.
Beautiful. Well, we'll have more on Catherine's big day in just a moment, but before that, some of your comments. We always love to receive them. After our story about Catherine visiting lots of potential schools for Prince George, Florentina writes, "It's not unusual for the royal family to visit a few schools. I remember Diana looking at Wellington College for the boys." Good memory, I think. And Dana Tate asks, "Question. My understanding is that Meghan has barely, if ever, visited Sussex County. This American is baffled how she can retain the Duchess title if she in no way serves nor represents Sussex. Why don't the good people of Sussex speak out? I enjoy your broadcast." Well, thank you, Dana. Now, Rebecca, is there an answer to that question?
Her and Harry have visited Sussex. They made a point of visiting it once, and that was only because they were working members of the royal family for such a short period of time. But actually, there has been polls of people in Sussex saying, we think that they should relinquish the title, actually, as there have been in York regarding Prince Andrew, who's the Duke of York.
Right.
And there's been quite a clamour there for him now he's no longer a working royal, and particularly under the circumstances in which he has stood down, to relinquish that. But of course, some royals don't, the titles they have, which are given as gifts by the monarch, often aren't relating to a place that exists. So do you remember the Edinburghs were the Earl and Countess of Wessex.
Oh, yes.
You know, Wessex doesn't actually exist as a county in the UK.
And also,
it did many moons ago.
If you are the Duke of Sussex, what does that mean? Does that indicate some sort of ownership over Sussex? Is that, or is it just like a symbolism?
It's symbolism.
It's just
Yeah.
honorary, no.
Yeah.
But it really stuck in the craw of the good people of Sussex that their Duke and Duchess aren't there and don't seem to care very much about them.
Well, you know, if you've never visited Sussex, I highly recommend it.
Beautiful part of the world.
Beautiful. Now, Nanakins comes in with a bit of a naughty comment. No comment on Harry calling Trump a sociopath. What on earth is Nanakins talking about, Richard?
I think this is a reference to that Vanity Fair long article which we've discussed in the past. And in there was the claim that when they were thinking of ideas for potential podcasts at Spotify, Harry had suggested doing one about sociopaths, and he highlighted people like Vladimir Putin and others, and what made them like that after their troubled childhoods. And he wanted to say, you know, I had a difficult childhood, but I came out okay. And
great idea. Phone Donald Trump and say, can I interview you about being a sociopath?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trump was another of them.
Yeah.
And I think the guys at Spotify thought, could be quite a difficult one for us to get off the ground. So no, it was another of those that never happened.
Oh, better luck next time, Harry. Well, Mrs. H writes, as always, your weekly video was great. Thank you. But really what I wanted to say was Joe's blouse was lovely. Well, thank you very much. I promise this is not my mum. She's Mrs. E. I changed the playback speed to slow as I always enjoy your montage. Now, there is a tip for those who want to enjoy the montage more. Just watch it in slow motion again and again and again. And finally, a comment from Elizabeth Ramsey, who writes, perhaps next week you could mention Princess Anne's trip to South Africa and her recognition of the South Africans who served in support of the British Army in World War I. As the Princess noted, this recognition was long overdue. In her unique position as a royal, she brought attention to their sacrifice and contributions, bringing honour and reaching people around the world who now have learned about these men and others like them. Well, consider that mentioned, Elizabeth, and what's more, I'll be asking the panel about it a little bit later on in the show. Let's return to the panel now, and Catherine. Now, Rebecca, as we record, she's out there working in what you've called her first full royal away day since 2023. Wow. So what's going on?
It is, yeah. Obviously, that sounds dramatic because, of course, last year she was away from the public gaze for most of the year because of her cancer diagnosis and subsequent treatment. So she is in South Wales today. And it was really meaningful for her to go to Wales because obviously she is Princess of Wales. It's the first time she's been to Wales on an engagement since October, again for the same reason, because of her treatment. So she's very keen to get there. I think what's really lovely today is that her first stop was a children's hospice called, I'm not going to pronounce it right, apologies to our Welsh viewers, but Tŷ Hafan, which the King was patron of before her, and actually Diana, Princess of Wales, before that. And she's with children, and she's brought them, I've been told, some new musical instruments to have a kind of music therapy session, and it's the start of what she hopes will be a lifelong association with the hospice. And then she's going to a place called Corgi, which is a factory producing textiles, particularly Welsh socks.
Love a sock.
I know you love a sock,
Yeah,
Jo. I thought you'd
yeah.
like this. And that's going to be a really fun engagement. She's going to be on the shop floor trying out some of the machinery. The one thing I would say is, you know, we've seen her out and about a lot this week, but just to temper expectations, this is part of a slow and managed return to public duty, so don't expect to see this every week.
Okay, but it's still a pretty big deal though, isn't it, Richard?
No, it really is a big
Absolutely,
deal.
yeah.
You know, this is Catherine carrying out a full day of engagements. We've only seen her previously, you know, at that hospital visit, but particularly being on her own as well. It shows that determination to get back to normal. And yes, as always, the palace are keen to stress, you know, don't get too excited. This might not be the same as every week, but I think it's a really good reason to be optimistic.
But also, Rebecca, the reception that she's been getting, it must really mean a lot to her. People get so excited to see her.
Yeah, and as I said, she was, I mean, someone described it to me on Monday when she was at the Holocaust Memorial Day event as being mobbed. People were overjoyed. And actually one of the survivors said afterwards, she is an absolute darling. And I think he made a point of telling her that William's a lucky man, and she went, "Well, I will make sure I tell my husband that."
Yeah, he
and
did win the love lottery.
Yeah, I think when you've been through the experience she has, and you've been out of the public eye, I think little moments like that, will really bolster her confidence moving forward.
But there will be that tension in this year, won't there, Richard? Like, as you say, the palace saying, calm down. It might not be every week, but then her popularity is such that people will be clamouring.
Yeah, I think in a way, sort of, the more she does, the more people want.
Yeah.
So that's when it gets quite hard, that someone has to say, actually, no, this is going to be a quiet week, or she needs to take it easy, or whatever. So yeah, they do have to manage those expectations.
But she does seem to really love the public-facing events. She's really good with people.
She is great with people. She has a very nice manner with people. She's very engaging, whether young or old. And you'll see that today when she's, playing musical instruments with the children. But equally, I think it's the way she's been brought up, that she can talk to people of an older age, look them in the eye with, empathy and with respect. And I think that's what people take from her.
Amazing. Right, well, there's a fun piece on the Mail Online Royals page this week looking at royal thriftiness in re-wearing old outfits and passing them around and down. And we've just been speaking about Catherine, who here she is seen wearing a chic Max Mara coat in December of 2015 on a trip to Portsmouth. And here is her mother wearing the same coat 9 years later at her daughter's carol service last Christmas. That's not all. Here we have them both wearing the same blue Reese Trina dress. Carol wore it first, this time in 2010 at Ascot, while Catherine was seen in it 2 years later. And this bright pink dress has bounced between both over the years. It's been to Ascot and to the Chelsea Flower Show. Rebecca, when you've got that kind of a wardrobe, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, to share it around?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I slightly hate the word rewear.
I
Because
know, it's just
every
like being
woman
normal
wears
with
the
clothes.
same, same outfit again and again. But I do particularly love the fact that Catherine and her mother, Carol, share the same outfits. I mean, there's, 30 years between them, but she looks amazing for her age, Carol.
She really does.
And you can see where Catherine gets her physique from. And I actually, I love the fact that, mother and daughter share outfits. They've got the same taste. When you see them out and about in public, it's very elegant.
See, my daughter would not be caught dead in anything I wear. It's amazing that they're compatible taste-wise.
Well, maybe that's now. When your daughter's a bit older, she might come
she
to
will
see
appreciate
your
the style maven
yeah.
that you are.
Very much doubt it. But you've also mentioned Catherine's jewellery earlier, and Carol and Catherine have shared some special earrings, haven't they?
Yeah, so Robinson Pelham earrings, £15,000 or just under.
Thrifty.
But they're a favoured jewellers of the Middleton family, and in fact, I seem to remember Carol and Michael buying a kind of suite of jewellery to give to their daughter when she got married to Prince William.
Suite of jewellery. Can you imagine such a thing?
And I seem to remember, it caught me slightly on the spot here, but they incorporated either acorns or oak leaves, which was part of her coat of arms that she was adopting because of her links with Berkshire. So there's a lot of meaning in it, and they work very closely with the jewellers to produce this piece. And again, how nice that, they're sharing them.
Amazing. And Kate wore them to a James Bond premiere.
Yes, she did. Yeah. And I think, Carol's been seen out and about a couple of times. And I suppose when you've got a £15,000 pair of earrings, then it's probably a good idea to get as much wear out of them
Show
as you
them
can.
off. Yeah. Sticking on this theme, there were a couple of fun historic bits of sharing in this piece too, like this emerald green Hardy Amy's coat and hat that the Queen wore in 1977, my goodness, during her Silver Jubilee tour. And then in 1995, a mere 18 years later, who should pop up wearing it but her sister, Princess Margaret, at a VE Day celebration. And in a nice bit of symmetry, there's another Hardy Amy's coat and hat, orange this time, worn by the Queen at Parliament in 1977. Also popped up in 1995, worn by Princess Margaret at Trooping the Colour. I mean, Richard, even living in their vast, sumptuous palaces, it seems like the Queen enjoyed a bit of thriftiness every now and again.
Yeah, it's always very difficult because when you have that life of luxury that obviously the royals do, how do you sort of keep in touch with the people and not look completely aloof? But I think Queen Elizabeth managed it. There was a fascinating insight into it when there was some sort of exposé when the Daily Mirror managed to get one of their reporters to train as a footman at Buckingham Palace.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's a very long sort of thing. Probably wouldn't actually do it now, but in those days it was okay. And he got this job and he took photos while he was inside. It was all very sneaky. But one of the most interesting photographs was of the Queen's breakfast, and it was all laid out in different Tupperware pots.
Gotta love Tupperware.
Exactly, and that, I think that really sort of endeared her to to the average person of Britain, that she was using these Tupperwares to keep things fresh and, you know, save amounts of cereals.
Makes a lot of sense. Tupperware, the great leveller of our times. Don't you think? Well, you can see that whole article on Mail Online. We'll put a link to that in the description below. Right, inevitably to the Sussexes now. Rebecca, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were criticised by a prominent politician here in the UK, weren't they?
It was a throwaway comment, but I think one that might bring a wry smile to people's faces. So Nigel Farage, who's a new MP, leader of the Reform Party, quite, I think, fair to say, you know, a controversial and diversive character in the UK, but he was invited to Buckingham Palace for a reception because he's a new MP in our Parliament, along with other new MPs and peers. And he didn't meet the King, but he did have a chat with Prince Edward and the Duchess of Edinburgh, and was complimenting them on their strong work ethic, which is obviously something we've discussed at length on the programme here. And then when the reporter spoke to him afterwards, he said, you know, I said to them, look, you know, you've been doing a real lot of heavy lifting recently, haven't you? You know, he said, we've had Wonder Boy and Wonder Girl basically trot off to America. You know, we don't have Prince Andrew anymore, so, you know, I feel like all the senior royals have, you know, been really pulling their weight recently, and I think people might just have a little wry smile. I mean, I suspect from what Farage has said in the past that it's not a compliment.
No, indeed.
Well, it is a fact there's been more pressure on members of the royal family, such as Edward and Sophie, since Harry and Meghan left, isn't it? I mean,
there has been, yeah,
that is
definitely.
a fact.
And they've risen to it. But Richard, I always turn to you, don't I, when I want an update on the court case in America questioning Harry's previous drug use. I think every now and again we think it's gone away, but there's a new court development. Yes,
I mean, as we know, you know, immigration is a big subject in America at the moment, with President Trump coming in, you know, with plans to repatriate or get rid of illegal immigrants. And in the case of Harry, there's this long-running case where the Heritage Foundation, a think tank, wants to know more information about the basis in which he acquired his status to live in the USA, because you're not allowed to, or you have to declare if you've had past use of drugs. Harry's written about that in his memoirs, and they want to know, what did he say? Did he tell the truth? But the judge previously decided that it should remain private. But, you know, Harry has a big problem now because it is thought that the new president may be less sympathetic to Harry and Meghan, judging on previous comments, and so may be inclined to make it known, to, you know, encourage the judge to make the reasons public why he thought that they shouldn't be known. You know, why can't Americans know why this person was allowed in and on what basis?
Because Americans don't, you know, I can't imagine them having much truck with royal privilege on such matters.
No, exactly. They're very meritocratic. The key thing is that everyone's treated the same, whether rich or poor. So, you know, there's definitely a public interest in knowing. And this case will be in court next week.
Right.
So
it's 5th of February, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you know, we await with interest.
Okay, so we'll probably talk about that on the show next week, no doubt. Now, Rebecca, to Princess Anne now. We did mention her trip to South Africa a minute ago. She gave a really revealing and typically forthright interview, didn't she?
She did. Actually, I just want to say I'm glad the viewer brought up that visit, because I think they were right. We shouldn't have overlooked it. And it was the first formal tribute of its kind that had been erected in South Africa. So actually it was significantly important for her. So much so that they did take one of our Press Association journalists there, and she did agree to a short interview after, just to highlight how important the trip was for her. And she kind of tackled a number of issues. I think notably for me was the accident she had last year, which obviously resulted in her in being in hospital for 5 days. And she admitted what I think I've told you on this programme before, that I've been told she has no memory of what happened at all. She said she was going to feed her chickens, but that wasn't the way she normally took. She can't explain how she ended up in that field. We think it was because she was kicked or headbutted by a horse. But, you know, she kind of said, look, sometimes you have to count your blessings and take each day as it comes, because I realised last year that I might not have been here as the circumstances are different. I mean, that's a terrible thought. And she also highlighted, the fact she's going to be 75 this year. Remarkably, and asked about her retiring, and she was like, well, this is not a job for people who retire, so
indeed, and
she's going to keep on going.
I think what's remarkable to me is I'd be terrified of horses after that, if it had kicked me in the head so much that I'd forgotten.
Well, she did. The thing is, Princess Anne did really sort of cast a bit of doubt on that.
Really?
Because, I mean, what the doctors had said was or the palace had said was her injuries were consistent with being kicked in the head by a horse.
Right.
But she said there were no horses in that area where she was found. So it kind of really did add to the mystery of it, actually.
Goodness me. Well, hear that? Yep, it's that time. It's time to celebrate an unsung hero of the royal family. And Richard, I believe it's someone we mentioned earlier and someone you've written about in your newsletter.
Yes, I mean, this section is Unsung Hero of the Royal Family. Well, this person is not royal at all. It is Carol Middleton, Princess of Wales's mother.
Oh, you found a loophole in the unsung hero.
She's the grandmother of our future king, mother of our future queen. But she turns 70 tomorrow, as you've mentioned earlier.
Aww.
Looks great, shares that same sense of style with her daughter. But, really has played a key role, and particularly over the past year with Catherine's health problems. She and her husband, Michael, have really been there supportive. And we saw an example of that when they were chosen to feature in the video which Catherine released to kind of celebrate her recovery, really. And that was very significant, I think, that they did. And I just made the point because I had spoken to Carol years ago. It was back in 2008. And she'd made the point then that she was very uncomfortable with all the attention, quite really distinct from that image that we've got of her being this sort of pushy mother that, Netflix promoted in The Crown, where they were sort of suggesting that she'd pushed her daughter towards Prince William.
Yeah.
But no, it was quite the opposite came across, that really she was very uncomfortable with all this attention, which she has managed for over all those years.
It's crazy, isn't it, to be in the spotlight like that when you're just a normal person. It's crazy, isn't it? But Rebecca, she'd never have the title of Queen Mother, but she's still a really important figure in the royal family. Is there some sort of grey area where she could have some sort of title?
I think this is a great choice for the unsung hero of the operation, because I don't think people should underestimate how important she's been, and also her husband Michael. But Carol is a very big character,
and managing their own fear and pain about their daughter as well.
And she is absolutely. I mean, the word rock is an overused word, but she really is to her daughter. She's the one that's been driving, the children on the school run, but with Catherine in the car so she could still say goodbye to her kids. She's been there with her every step of the way. And how important she's been to William, because of course William lost his mother at a very young and formative age. And I think it's too much of a cliche to say she's become the mother that he lost, but there's no doubt he leans on her very heavily and has nothing but love and admiration for her. So the question over title is quite an interesting one, because of course it's been raised, isn't it, recently? Should she get one?
There was a piece, I think, Richard, by Sophia Money-Coutts on the Mail Online asking whether they might be given titles.
Yeah, I think
both the Middletons.
The thing is, though, I'm not sure they would welcome it, because it would make them look like they were sort of taking on airs and graces and trying to be grand. When I think they're more than happy to be middle class, and they wouldn't really want to be seen to be looking for a title. So I'd be quite surprised if it happened.
Yeah.
Is there any way to acknowledge that services to the crown? Because I guess that's kind of what has been undertaken.
I suppose a sovereign can give kind of. You could make someone a member of the Royal Victorian Order, which basically means letters after your name, and it's a sign of thanks. So they could do that. I don't think we'd see that in the King's lifetime, but possibly in William's. But again, as Richard rightly points out, the whole point is that they do this because they love their daughter, they adore their grandchildren. I mean, they really are hands-on grandparents. When William and Catherine go on their royal trips, those children aren't left with a nanny at the home like Charles and Princess Anne were. They go to stay with their grandparents, and they take them to out for walks, the farm park, to the seaside. Sophia, in her piece, recalls an incident. She knows someone that was on holiday on Mustique at the same time as them, and told her how she'd saw Carol trying to get Louis out of the sea. Come on, Louis, come on, Louis. And he said to her, "No, I'm not coming. You're old."
Oh,
which I think it's a sweetly Louis thing to say. They really are hands-on grandparents. So I'm not sure they'd personally ever want to be thanked for being that, because they're just doing what comes naturally to them as a family.
I'm not coming, you're old. I mean, that is a diss that a grandma just has to take on the chin, isn't it?
I'd never heard of that, and that is one of the joys of the Mail's pieces, because our writers do really know what they're talking about and speak to the people who see
well, generally
things.
the attractions of Mustique is that it's a private island. And people won't report back what you say.
Call anyone old that you want in private. Goodness me. Well, to celebrate Catherine's big day back and her mother Carol's birthday, here are some of our favourite pictures of Catherine and the rest of the Middletons over the years. Some lovely ones there. A reminder that there are more great pictures of the royals in our fashion compilation special. Click here for that. And just time to say thanks to Rebecca, Richard, and of course to you for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.